Jeremy, can we get a quick hello to the Kering camera, please?
Hi, Kering. How are you? Sorry, my voice is like this. This can't. You know. What do you expect? I saw a 4-hour movie yesterday.
One straight ahead. Look on your right, please. On your right, and then step to the right.
Okay, and down here, please. Just a step back, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much.
You're very tall. And sir, just this way. Thank you.
Okay, right in front of you, please.
Just coming back around to your... And down here.
Thanks.
And in
Front of you, sir.
And sir, next one along. Thank you. Keep it there, sir.
Keep coming to your role. Keep coming. Back one step to the right and go to the last stop.
Just for here.
Lovely. And done here with the white shirt. Should we done here straight? Chin down? Yeah, lovely like this.
And once you're done with the white shirt, do the black shirt, please.
And do very well that last one. Just tiny bit of a smile for me.
A little tiny step back, please. A little tiny step back. Okay, lovely.
And one for me here. And here in the middle, sir.
Another one done here.
And I'll do one near there.
And
Yeah, a bit of a smile. Yeah, lovely like this.
And the smile to the very end. To the very end. Yay.
and just back to the top there again. Thank you.
Jeremy, come with me.
Bye-bye.
Chief Correspondent Elizabeth Wagmeister, and we are thrilled to be back with a fantastic lineup of many women and men who empower women. This morning, we are beginning our Women in Motion talks with playwright, producer, and actor Jeremy O. Harris. You may know Jeremy O. Harris from Emily in Paris. You may also know that he is a producer on HBO's Euphoria, and he is the playwright behind the groundbreaking show Slave Play, which was nominated for 12 Tony Awards. Today we are going to be talking with Jeremy about his career and also how he empowers women in underrepresented groups across the theater industry. Without further ado, let's get ready to chat with Jeremy O. Harris.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm
so happy to be here with you.
She wants to sit down, please. Photographers. 40 seconds, 30, 40. Go ahead, shoot, don't move, guys. Thank you. In the meantime, if you could have your cell phone on silent, on vibrate, so you highly appreciate it.
Right in the middle, please.
All the way to the left, please.
Okay, 1 second here down.
Thank you.
Down here, right in front of you.
And one more time on me, please, sir.
And one look here.
Down, down, down.
Sorry, I can't tell what anyone is.
Get to the right shoulder.
Benissimo.
Then back to your own chair. That's it. Thank you very much.
Sure, over here. Over here, please. Thank you very much.
10 seconds.
Here, please, sir. This
Hi,
way. Here.
hi.
Thank you very much.
Jerry.
Bonsoir. It's not bonsoir. It's not bonsoir time.
That's right, Jim. The rappers, thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Je regrette. Sorry, I'm late.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Can you see?
Yes.
With
I
all
can
the
see
flashing
really well.
lights?
Yeah. Listen, I'm not used to that. You know, every time I come, the last time I came to Cannes, I was in. The first time I ever walked that little like carpet to go to the Grand Lumière, I was behind Kaya Gerber. And I've never seen someone have so much grace amongst so much flash. And she was just like, and I was like, like I felt like but now I'm used to it. You know, I did a master class with Kaya Gerber. Now I feel good.
I was going to say, you're a pro. You handled that with a lot of grace as well. Now, you look incredible.
Thank
By
you.
the way, I love this outfit. It is Cannes, so we do have to talk about the fashion a bit.
It's true.
Now, a little birdie told me that you have 21 outfits for Cannes. Is this true?
Wow. Okay, and now I know. Yes, I do have 21 outfits for Cannes. I'm very excited about it. I was a critic. I see one of my very good friends back here from my critic days, Zach. I was a critic, so I would go to all the film festivals, and each film festival has its own identity, right? And I really wanted to live inside of each of those identities fully. So like the identity of being at Sundance, for example, is like wearing a puffy coat, like like feeling breezy, feeling like masculine, like feeling vibey, and like so I did that when I was on the jury this year. I like wore all the big coats. I like was very into that. This year, I found out I was going to Cannes as an actress, which is that's how I'm identifying here.
Yeah. Congratulations.
And thank you.
By the way.
I'm really excited. One of my very good friends made this movie, and it was really fun because I got to work with a lot of friends. But I was like, I want to be Fan Bingbing in the 2007 Cannes this year. So Fan Bingbing like iconically had like 25 looks like on every carpet. So I was like, I want to try to do that. So me and Mel Ottenberg like made a suite of looks. So like today I'm doing 4 outfits in one day. It's gonna be fun.
I love it.
Yeah.
And fashion really plays a part of your persona, and you could tell that you have so much fun with fashion. Can you talk about how fashion really plays a role into your life and your career creatively?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, being a queer person, being a person who has, has constantly wondered how they want to express both their gender and their identity to the world without people writing a story onto my body, which often happens. Like, there's no way I can stop the stories people write on my body because I'm 6'5" and I'm black, right? And also I flounce about like this. And as a child, I recognized that, but I knew that I could confuse that story the minute I wore a baseball uniform, to school instead of my school uniform. And so being able to tell different stories about my body, about my day, about the world I want to exist within through clothing became my armor for the world. And I still like having that armor because armor is something that not only protects you, but gives you a little more strength. Like the more you're carrying on you, the more the heavier things you can lift around you.
Absolutely. And I do feel like today, you were ahead of your time, but today fashion norms are really changing and gender is becoming more fluid. The definition of masculinity is really changing. There's a bigger embrace of femininity, certainly with fashion. How have you seen that progress, certainly in the entertainment industry?
Well, what's funny is that, the more you read about, both indigenous cultures, but, early African cultures and, a lot of spaces that were, that were free from the, and unvarnished by, Western Christianity and the morals that came with Catholicism, you see that and even in Catholicism, you see that gender had no presentation for a very long time. There was a lot of complexity around how we expressed ourselves, and I think that what's exciting is that that goes in and out of fashion for specifically men in the West. And I really like that now it seems like we're actually having the conversation without it just being Prince wandering around in his girlfriend's t-shirts, Now it's actually no, let's talk about what gender means. Let's talk about the construct of this and let's start deconstructing it as a society as a whole, right? And maybe through deconstructing it, we can get to a more equitable space around people who are different genders and have different gender expressions, because like, you know, I have a grandmother who is 6'5", right? And hearing all the conversations around specifically transness in America, right? And how like, you know, there's a certain type of woman that is a woman, and like this is what, and I'm like, it's so crazy because my entire life I watched my grandmother have her gender challenged by people. The minute she walked into a women's bathroom, people were like, "What are you doing?" This woman who birthed 4 kids, you know? And so I'm really excited that like perhaps those things that stopped my grandmother from feeling fully embodied in the gender that she was assigned and fully embodied in the gender that she expressed, might some of those barriers of entry to like womanness will start to be eroded by people like having a deconstruction of how we define gender.
Absolutely. Now, let's go back to your childhood.
Yeah.
When did you know that this is what you wanted to do? Or did you know? I know that when you were young, you acted, you wrote, but did you know that you would be
Sitting on a stage at Cannes, talking to
Yes.
a room full of people.
Yes.
Yes, I did. No, when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh wow.
That was yeah. Like
Okay.
I don't know who gave me that idea or why, but I read. So this is very Elle Woods coded.
Yeah.
But when I was in I wrote this into my pilot actually. I have a pilot, guys. I'm not supposed to talk about writing. Is WGA Strong, but I wrote one and it's good. And in it there's this childhood memory of me in a barbershop at like 5 years old. I had to have been 5 because they were talking about O.J. Simpson, and I wanted to like zone out because I was like, this is getting dark. And I was looking at a magazine and they said like Harvard Law School was the hardest school to get into. And so I remember telling my mom, I was like, I want to go there. My mom was like, why? I was like, well, it looks pretty and it's really hard to get into. So I was like, so I'm going to go to Harvard Law School and I'm going to be a lawyer. And then I watched that TV show, The Practice, the David E. Kelly show all the time. And like the black lawyer on The Practice like never lost a case. And I was like, I'm going to be like him. And then as I started exploring like my love of literature, my like obsessions with like embodying things on stage, because I had a great drama teacher, Candace Owen Williams, shout out, who like really invited the stage into like my understanding of how to extend my love of literature. As I started seeing that, I started realizing like, oh, Jeremy, you never wanted to be a lawyer. You just wanted to play one on TV.
Right.
And so I think that like, you know, so much of my childhood had a theatricality to it. So I knew that theater in some way was going to be a part of that. And because I also like, you know, had a great film world around me growing up, like I had a lot of my favorite people in the world were at the video shop in my town. And then when I moved to Chicago, I randomly lived about a block away from Facet's Videotech. And that was where this man named Lou introduced me to like all of these auteurs artists. And so I got to see how like there were all these like people like, you know, Rainer Werner Fassbinder, who like wrote plays and also wrote movies. And then like, you know, Shirley Clark, who's my favorite documentarian, you know, filmed so much of the theater around her while also like making a new language of cinema. And I was like, oh, maybe cinema is going to be a part of this theater thing I do as well. And that's finally coalescing this year.
Yes. I love, we have a Prince reference and we have an Elle Woods reference in
Yes.
the first few minutes. So,
You know, you got to give both.
yes,
you know?
I love this. All right, so you started to write slave play when you were at Yale, is that correct?
Yes.
And tell me about the journey from when you wrote it to bringing it to Broadway.
It's really wild. I mean, I kind of misspoke because I think we have to redefine, again, thinking about the writer's strike. We have to redefine what writing is, right? And for me, I actually started writing slave play in my head and amongst my friend group for months and months and years before I got into Yale. So by the time I applied to Yale, when they asked me, why is Yale the right school for you? Jeannie O'Hare, who is, again, a genius. If you saw Matilda the musical, that was her brainchild, Jeannie O'Hare. She was the head of the program at the time. She was like, if you could come to Yale, like, what would you do here? Like, why does Yale need you and why do you need Yale? And I was like, I work at a donut shop. I am a film critic. I had a massive car accident with Zach Gaines that year. And I was like, I can't go back. I was like, I have too many hospital bills, and I don't know how I'm gonna pay them. I was like, but I have an idea for a play, and I know that if I don't have to work at a donut shop, so I can pay off my hospital bills because I had to go to the hospital in Utah leaving a film festival, I will be able to write this play. And she's like, what's the idea? And because I've been writing it in my head for 2.5 years, I was able to tell this woman in this interview every beat of slave play up to Act 1. Like the turn. The turn at the end of Act 1 was what I had beaten out. I was like, there's a character named Kanisha. She's married to Jim. Then there's a character named Alana. She's with Philip. And then when I said the turn, she was like, that's interesting. I was like, and I'll write that in my first year. And she was like, you're in. So my first year, I worked really hard, wrote the entire thing, started writing the entire thing, couldn't figure out the third act. There was a third act that I think a lot of people who like critique the play now would have loved, but that everyone that read it was like, this was bad. And I was like, I know, it doesn't feel real. And then when I finally listened to the woman that was playing the role at Yale, Antoinette Crowe Legacy, I realized what the play was and was able to push through it. But the thing that got me to get her to read that was that Janixa Bravo, into my first year, contacted me and said, I have to write this movie called Zola. I really want you to write it, but you're in grad school. Do you have homework over the summer? I'm fast forwarding to that story because I know I'm talking for a long time. And I was like, I do have homework over the summer. She's like, well, finish your homework, then you can apply. Then I can have you interview with A24 to see if you can be the writer on this movie.
Wow.
So I rushed to. I sat down with the internet, finished the play. The play was done, sent it to Janixa. I was like, it's done, can I write a movie now? And she was like, yes. And so I got that. So Janixa is also part of how it ended at Yale. Anyway, did it at Yale. And then, I don't know, it's so hard to explain. I was a hustler. I had knocked on every door before I got into school because I didn't think I was going to get in. But I made the decision that I had to leave LA. I couldn't be there anymore. And so every theater artistic director or their intern knew me, and I'd had a meeting with them. I'd written them letters, and they had all been like, well, when you write something at grad school, send it to us. And so I sent all of them Slave Play, and 7 theaters said absolutely not. There is no interest in this. But 3 theaters actually of 10 were like, actually, you're doing something interesting here. And so one of those theaters was New York Theater Workshop. I put it up there. A producer who no one talks about anymore because he throws potatoes at people, spread the word that he wanted to take it to Broadway. But another man, Greg Noble, had already invested in it, so he had first rights. And after the Potato Man decided he didn't want to do it anymore, the other producer was like, I'm still going to do it. I've never lead produced on Broadway, and I'm 27 years old, and I'm going to do it. And so I still don't know how Greg was able to pull it off. I know how we got the theater, and it was because I sat down with Bob Winkle, and we sat across from him, and I was like, and Bob is a septuagenarian, he's from a very specific generation. He's from a line of Schuberts because Broadway is run like the mafia. There's 3 families that run all the Broadway theaters, and so you had to sit down with these octogenarians and explain to them why your new play should be there and not another Arthur Miller. And they're all lovely people. They also really love theater. They just also come from a different generation, right? So he was like, why would we do a play called Slave Play? This feels crazy. And that's a really wild Bob Winkle impression. And I was like, Bob, in 1975, this play premiered. In 1976, you guys did Intozaki Shange's for Colored Girls at the Booth Theater. That's a Schubert organization. That play shouldn't have been on Broadway, and yet it worked. In 1967, you guys did Look Back in Anger by John Osborne, which started the Angry Men plays of London. That premiered at the Golden Theater. My play could go to the Golden. And I literally I was In-Game premiered at this 1947. And he was like, how do you know all these dates? Now, to be fair, I knew all those plays premiered there. Didn't know the dates off the top of my head. But here's a key clue, kids. If you're gonna meet someone important, just Google everything they've done right before you walk into the meeting. So I had all the years fresh in my mind. So I was 1947, 1966, blah, blah.
You came prepared.
Yeah, I came prepared. And then we got the theater. And I don't know, it's really wild because I'm making a documentary about Slave Play right now. That's a secret. I wasn't telling anyone that. Anyway.
I was going to say, I think that's news.
Yeah, anyway. Wow, I can't believe I said that. Fuck. Okay, anyway.
But since you did, can you tell us more?
Well, it's really about how, I think when Slave Play went to Broadway, there was a sensibility or a critique that it was written for that space. And there's also this idea that if you've written a play that's on Broadway, the play should then become a film, right? And I was like, I never made Slave Play to be a film. That's not the idea of why, that's not why I write plays either. There are some plays I've written and I'm like, oh, that could be a film. But Slave Play specifically was a play that I wrote for Basement with my friends. I always imagined that play would maybe be a play that the Wooster Group would do in the Performing Garage, or that could happen at Abrams Art Center. Those I've said that to everyone since the beginning. It's why I was most excited about New York Theater Workshop doing it, because that's the closest off-Broadway theater to being in a basement. And yet when it got to Broadway, there were people who were like, oh, well, he always wanted us to go to Broadway, or oh my God, it's on Broadway now. Can we do a series, kind of like a Westworld world, but like with slavery. And I was like, no. Very sweet person pitched that to me. I hope, like, please don't, I love your idea. It's just not that one. But like, and I wanted to make a movie that was about how slave play would never be a movie. It was always meant to be a play. So it's kind of inspired by Shirley Clark, kind of inspired by William Greaves, because Symbiopsychotoxicplasm Take One is my favorite movie. And it's about that sort of tension. But when we got to Broadway, it was really bizarre because I didn't know what that would mean for my life. And what it meant in the interim was that the bet I made, you see how you helped me get it full circle? The bet I made on myself when I sat down with Jeannie O'Hare and said, I need to be able to pay my medical bills. I need to go to Yale so I can write this play, paid off, because the only way a playwright can have anywhere near a middle-class existence for even a year, right, is by getting a play in a commercial theater or getting lots of licenses. But like 2 months of my play on Broadway helped pay off those medical bills, got me my first apartment in New York, and like allowed me to have like, you know, a lifestyle where I wasn't sleeping on couches like I was doing in LA.
Right. Now, you brought up the Potato Man. We're not going to mention anything further, but I'm glad you brought...
Again, the Potato Man can be quite lovely. He's like the best read person I know and really taught me a lot.
Okay.
He didn't throw a potato at me.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. But I'm glad you brought that up because I think it brings up this changing of the guard that we're seeing across many industries, but certainly entertainment. And I think what you're doing so incredibly well, not for yourself, for others, is really paving the way forward and making spaces for underrepresented groups that don't typically have that access. So that includes your community, that includes women. You speak out a lot about this. Can you talk about where this confidence comes from, that you knew that you have a bigger purpose that is larger than Jeremy O'Harris, and you knew that when you had a bit of success in this industry, that you would then push forward and pave the way for others?
I think it's a mix of stupidity and daddy issues.
Okay.
I am dumb, right? Like I don't know.
You're not dumb, but okay.
I'm dumb in the sense that like I'm not like protective of myself when it comes to powerful people, right? Like I think that like I speak my mind too often, and that's mainly because I have like authority issues with authority, right? Like I was raised in a matriarchy with a lot of women who were told by a lot of men like what they could and couldn't say and how they could and couldn't be, and they all said like fuck you, and they raised me with that energy, and like, you know, I didn't know my dad, so I'm always like fuck you to like random men, and they're like, what did I do to you?
What did I do? Yeah.
So I think that like that means that like, you know, when you see a system that like isn't like, you know, when you see that you're a part of a season of theater at like a historic theater in LA, and you are like the only, like I think I was the only black person. No, I was one of 2 black people in the season that year, but there were no women except for a revival of Pearl Cleage. You say like, this doesn't feel right. And then when you hear someone else articulate, this doesn't feel right, you say like, yeah, this definitely doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So then you tell the theater like, I don't feel good about this.
Yes.
And then when the theater doesn't say like immediately like, yeah, we don't feel good about it either, you pull your play until they make a commitment to women. Now, a smarter person, like most of the other playwrights, wouldn't have done that, right? Because like even in doing that, we got a full season of women the next season, a commitment to a full season of women the next season, and parity over the next 5 years. We also got 9 commissions for women of color to write new plays for them. That was amazing, and yet there were still critiques online, even by some feminists, that I did that for my own brand. And I was like, I don't know, but like maybe there was a smarter way to do that, you know, that wasn't so public, you know?
Well, I hate to use the word disruptor, but that really fits in this story because you weren't thinking, but you just said, I'm going to do it because it's what feels right, and then you disrupted the system. That was in, I believe, 2021, when there was a theater group in Los Angeles, and you said there's not equity here. There's no, maybe not none, but there were not enough female playwrights.
There was definitely not enough female playwrights. Like in the theater has like multiple theaters, and in my theater specifically, there were literally no women at the Mark Taper. It was like psychotic. Love those people. Lindsay and Tyrone showed up and like really listened, which is rare for any people of that much power, you know, to listen and then make swift shifts and changes. But yeah, it was crazy.
And they did.
They did, and their commitment still stands, you know. And Tyrone created this amazing system where these 9 or 10 women of color all have these phenomenal commissions with commitments to stage their work.
That's amazing. Now, you have recently been speaking out on social media, certainly, about the writer's strike, and we recently learned that the Tonys are going to happen. It was questionable for a moment there with the WGA on strike. I actually have some, you wrote some very impassioned tweets that I wanted to read. You said, in a season that has more writers of color and women nominated than the whole history of these categories in the Tonys, if we deny them this showcase, this ability for the nation to see them in their work, we are damaging a new ecosystem, one that's finally seeing new voices. That was I encourage you all to go to Jeremy's Twitter, see everything that he has been saying about the Tonys and the strike. But what is it about the Tonys that it's so important that it did continue to happen in terms of the promotion for the theater industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to say first and foremost that the reason the Tonys weren't going to happen is the fault rests solely on the AMPTP. I don't know. It's a weird acronym. On those rich producers. No, on the execs who didn't come to the table to make a deal with the writers that was equitable and fair, right? Point blank, period. But what I said in my tweets was that the reason I had to reach out to the WGA, and we all had to reach out to the WGA to ask them to not picket the awards, is that the awards do mean something to the entire ecosystem, a very delicate ecosystem. Yes. I expressed that I feel that theater is like a coral reef, right? It's literally endangered. And in our battle with the AMPTP, blah, 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 we cannot drive a battleship through a coral reef. We need to protect it because that's going to be our only safe haven. If this lasts a decade, every single writer in the WGA can write a play, right, that they will own. You don't own the TV shows you write. You don't own the movies you write, but you own your plays. That's why you get paid so little for them. But once you own something that brings joy, brings community around it, there's no better feeling. So we must protect that. And as a boy who grew up in a rural town in Virginia, who had nothing around him except for books and tobacco fields, it's very, very important to me that kids in other rural spaces and that don't have access to theater can watch it on the Tonys and see just a little glimpse of what else there is. Moreover, inside of the ecosystem of the theater, and I'm just going to talk about this quite quickly, having your play showcase gets your play done in a lot of different places. Licensing is how people get money for theater, right? And so how you have a middle class life, So if you're Martina Mayock, who wrote Cost of Living, one of the best plays of the season, she's amazing. If you haven't read it, read it. She's Polish. If you're Martina Mayock and you do Cost of Living on Broadway, that means that 10 to 15 theaters will then license your play around America to do it. And if those 10 to 15 theaters and regionals are doing it, that means that 20 to 30 colleges or high schools are doing it. And that means that that year you will have enough money to pay your rent, whether you're writing on Secession or not.
This reminds me of a few days ago, you were on MSNBC. We were talking about this. It was a very powerful interview, and you were talking about the play that you are producing with Oscar Isaac and Rachel Brosnahan, and you really helped get it onto Broadway. And you said the reason why this is so important is it was written by a queer black woman, and now that it's on Broadway, this kind of forces the hand that now at high schools it's going to be in school theater and community theater. So can you talk about that play and why it was so important to give it that big platform and what that will do specifically right now when books and stories are being withheld from a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, in this time when, people like Ron DeSantis and a litany of other horrifically fascist people, and again, if you haven't seen Steve McQueen's 4.5-hour doc, which I sat through yesterday because it's phenomenal, watch it because it really does paint a picture of how quickly fascism can infect everything and how fascism still is in all of our architecture, and so the ghosts of it are still possessing us. Those men are possessed by the ghosts of fascists and Nazis, and they are trying to get rid of everything that says that we are equitable people to white men, right? They want to get rid of the books of Patricia Highsmith. They want to get rid of the books of Lorraine Hansberry. And Lorraine Hansberry wrote this play play. It's her last play. She wrote it when she was 34 years old, which I'm about to turn next month. It was the last play she wrote because she died at 34 of pancreatic cancer. And she's one of our greatest minds. And part of a project that I started with Slave Play when it was on Broadway was the Golden Project, which was a project wherein I made a list of the most influential Black plays to me, some of which made it to Broadway, many of which never did, and that we sold them all in the lobby of the theater, and then we sent them to every library. We sent one to a library in every state, right? Primarily places that like didn't have like access to like a strong dramatic literature space. And one of those plays was The Sign in Sidney Brewstein's Window. And that play for me is this rebel yell about our time now that people don't know and people don't really care about. And I think that, you know, something about being like if you're a woman of influence, a woman of status, generally people distill your genius down to one work, right? You know, if you're Sylvia Plath, it's, you know, it's the people love to just like minimize the like contributions of these people that have been so influential to like the canon. And meanwhile, we get the B, C, D sides of every Arthur Miller play that's ever happened, you know? And so with Lorraine Hansberry, her A side, her hit single is Raisin in the Sun, obviously. But I was like, I think it is actually necessary for the world to see the complete picture of this woman's life, this woman's very short but very impactful life, by also seeing The Sign in Sidney Brewstein's Window and having that play as this companion piece to Raisin in the Sun in everyone's minds.
Now I want to get back to the strike for a moment. How do you foresee this all ending? I know you're very involved and very vocal about it.
I mean, I see it ending with a deal that's equitable, a deal that doesn't imagine that, you know, like, here's how I've been explaining it to people, because I don't, like, again, like, one of the great things about being in a union is that you don't have to love the way every person in your union explains, tells their story of why we're striking. But what I love about the story I tell is that it's the way my mom understood it. So I'm going to share that with you guys. My grandmother used to bake pies, right? People would order a lot of pies from my grandmother. And like she'd always like, you know, and she knew that like if she made these pies for women, there would be enough left over for her to also make a pie or some other sweet nothings for her kids. Like she had 4 kids and we were in the South. So ostensibly the AMPTP has told us for years like that streaming was going to be our way of like, they were going to give us money to make a pie and we were always going to have enough left over to eat like pies for years to come. And it used to be that way when we were making TV shows on Fox in the 90s. You would make a pie and you'd be able to eat off that pie for months and months and years and years and years after. People who made the pies for friends still eating, right? Now we are making pies for people who are paying for them, and after promising us that they would give us enough, that they would leave enough left, there would be enough left over for us to also eat, we are seeing that all we're left with is crumbs. And all we're asking for is enough on the side to also make our own pies, you know? And so, yeah, I think that it's going to end with us having enough to make our own pies soon, right? Because right now, everyone at the top is getting fat on pies, and I want to be a little fat too. You know what I mean? Like it's important to leave this world a little chubby. So
that is a great analogy. I might be quoting you on this when I have to explain the strike to some people who are not following it so closely.
Yeah.
So we spoke about the Tonys and the importance of how they really magnify great work, and Slave Play was nominated for 12 Tonys. It made history, and a lot of people very upset didn't win anything. Why do you think that is?
Why didn't Beyonce win? Oh, no.
Great question, though. Great question.
I think that again, I said this at the time, and again, because I'm making a documentary, I've had to watch all these annoying videos where I was like crying about it. But like, it's like, you know, if you set out to make something that like upset people, right? That like would like get people to like think about their complicity inside of a complex system, right? You can't also expect to be patted on the back by the same people you're asking to like re-engage with their privileges, right? And so I actually see it as like a badge of honor that a play like mine got to have such a large platform and will most likely stay in the history books forever because even if another play somehow gets 13 nominations, which will be really hard, if another play does get more nominations than me, I don't know that another play that will lose as many as me. So no matter what, I will always have a trivia line on the Tonys, which I think is really iconic. People will always have to wrestle with what was slave play, you know? Right. In the same way that like I wrestle with like, you know, what, like all these, I'm such a weird freak, like, there's so many weird things I know about like which roles have gotten nominated for the Tony the most times, and so then it makes me go and read that play. Right. I want some weird freak to go back and read Slave Play in like 55 years when no one cares about Jeremy O. Harris anymore.
Well, this is also the best way to reframe the narrative, which basically what you're saying is if I am the biggest loser of the Tonys, then that's an award in itself.
It literally is.
Exactly.
It's the most iconic award.
Yes, and then you keep going and going. Now, with that said, there's a lot of new voices on, not just on Broadway, in the theater industry. Is Broadway doing enough to sustain these new voices? Because we're seeing some open, but then they're gone. I mean, A Strange Loop was the most talked about show for the year, gone pretty quickly. So is Broadway doing enough?
I mean, I'm nominated for 2 Tonys this year for producing, which is very cool. One for Sidney Brewstein, and another for a play called Ain't No Mo by Jordan E. Cooper, who took my title as youngest black man ever play on Broadway when he became the youngest black man ever play on Broadway, which was very cool. And Jordan E. Cooper is nominated for 6 Tonys with his first play on Broadway. Tied was Tom Stoppard, which is crazy. And he's also nominated as actor and playwright, which he's in a lineage. I think the last person to have that is Harvey Fierstein, but I have to look that up. His play closed early. His play closed after, I think, 23 performances, and that's based on a lot of things. I think that like when you have new people on Broadway, you also have to know how to market to those people. I think that like, you know, the fact, and this is across the board in film, television, everything, in literature. Literature actually does it better because there are more women in publishing who recognize that women read 75% of the books in America. So they actually like target women in their, in how they sell them. People don't target our biggest theater goers, which are 70% women in America as well. We don't target people outside of the white Upper East West Side. Like across the board, if you ask any major theater agency, like how do you market plays, like what sells tickets the best, they'll say have your show on MSNBC or have a big article in the New York Times. Now, none of my friends read the New York Times. A couple of them watch MSNBC, but mainly because their parents tell them to.
Right. Or they watched it because your clip went viral. Yes, they never actually watched the show. They just saw you.
Exactly. And I think that, like, you know, we have to reframe and reimagine how we invite people to the theater. I think also in the case of black people, you know, coming back to the theater is a historic thing that we have to think about. Again, thinking about the ghosts in our architecture. My grandmother could not go to a theater with the women in this room all together when she was my age, or a little bit younger. But in South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Jim Crow laws were still such that she would not be able to sit across from you as someone who was like developing a taste as a child for like what their leisure activities were. So if we are recognizing that there are still people alive that and children of those people who have a feeling that they're not allowed in a space, don't you think you have to radically apologize for that somehow? You know? So one of the ways I've radically apologized for that is by creating blackout nights for my shows, you know, where I have a whole theater just for black people. And I'm like, guys, come in. Our theaters can look like, you know, the Gershwin Theater when they're doing Music Man, right? And when you go to Music Man, I will be the only black person in the orchestra 99% of the time, right? That's no shade on that. It's just like that's who it's marketed to, and that's how they get there. But I'm like, we can also, I want more people to be able to, I want to go see Music Man and see like all black people in the audience somehow, or all Asian people in the audience somehow. Because the demographics are such in New York that could be possible, you know? It's just about like, you know, telling a different story about who we want in the theater. And so I think they're telling a good story about who they want, which names they want on the marquee right now. I don't think they've fully understood how to say like, here's also who we want in our theaters.
Right. Well, aside from the blackout nights, I want to talk about some of the philanthropy that you do. So you're doing a lot to make theater more accessible. Of course, tickets are through the roof.
Yes.
And I know for Slave Play, you had a certain amount of tickets or certain nights that you lowered prices. As you said, you also donated books by Black playwrights to libraries. When you signed your overall deal with HBO, you made sure to include a fund in your deal to commission theater projects for others. You pledged fees and royalties from Slave Play to fund micro grants to playwrights, and you funded with the New York Theater Shop two $50,000 commissions for new works by Black women playwrights. So you're investing a lot of your time into making theater more accessible, into really making it so that there are new voices that continue to come. I want to pivot to some of your other work aside from theater. So we mentioned the HBO deal. You are a producer on Euphoria. That is a show that has a lot of incredible women on it and a lot of incredible young women from a younger generation. What have you learned from working on that show with those young women?
I mean, Sydney is like such a special young person, and same with Maud. Like, the ways in which these young women show up and like are the hardest working people you've ever met in your life is like otherworldly. It like teaches me how to work better. You know what I mean? Like, they like are very much about their they're very much not only about the business that they're doing, but they're very much about their craft, and that's so inspiring. But you know, you can't talk about Euphoria without talking about like the ways in which Zendaya is such a leader there, right? Like, you know, you see her and Sam sitting together going through every scene in the script, and she's a producer as well, and you see her like asking questions not only as a lead actress, but also as a producer, and also as someone who I think is secretly about to be a director, right? Because she's also like mining him for every piece of information. But she's like, so when the camera's gonna move there, why is that, you know? And I think that like, you know, what I learn every time I go to that set is that like, I can't stop working really hard. I can't like rely on, you know, my charms and, you know, the ways in which people perceive, you know, me because of my height, right? Like, I do think that like I get away with a lot by being tall, you know. But it's like yes, I might charm the pants off of you by being really tall, but I also have to work really hard once I get there, you know. And then I also am learning a lot about having like an unerring sense of curiosity about the craft I do. You know, like I think that one of the things that Z told me, because I'm trying to convince her to do something in my sphere. But one of the things she told me is that she's like,
Wait, hold on. Let's go back to that. What would that be?
It might be a play.
Might be a play? For those who couldn't hear, he said it might be a play.
Yeah.
That he's trying to get Zendaya on board with.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe this will bully her into calling me back.
Yes, we'll send this to her.
But no, what she said was that she was like, I actually am really excited about doing this because I only like doing things that scare me. And I think that, you know, me being here with the movie is like that, you know. I mean, again, not to call him out again, I am in Zach's movie, and it is very fun to act in things. Like, I love acting. But I do think that like once I got like, you know, all these laurels and people were like, we really like Jeremy, I stopped doing things that scared me as much, you know. It became very easy to be like on a show like Emily in Paris where like I get to show up, do 2 episodes, have a lot of fun and leave. But like now I'm like, okay, I did train as an actor. Like what if I call up, you know, one of the directors I worked with, like Olivier Assayas, and I'm like, hey, like is there something like really crazy I can do? Like, can I run around with a gun in Tokyo for you or something, you know? Because that would literally scare the pants off me. Like, imagining myself have to embody someone who's like the type of person who holds a gun legitimately would frighten me to my core. And I think that's the kind of thing that Z does all the time. That's the kind of thing that Sydney does. Sydney's in my Friends movie right now called Reality, which is based on the best play that was on Broadway and closed too soon. It was called Is This a Room? Phenomenal theater. Go to Lincoln Center and watch it. But the movie's coming out on HBO, and I know that scared her. You know, she's working with a first-time director, a theater director, like, and having to embody a real-life person, not from a adaptation of what they said, but from the literal transcript of what they did. And I'm really thrilled to move in that direction, especially now that the writers are striking, and we're striking as long as it takes, guys. And so if the strike is happening for as long as it takes, I think it's giving me time and license to like step out into the world and do something that scares me.
Right. I know the writer's strike obviously impacts this, but is there anything that you know about the timing of season 3 of Euphoria? We can do a staring contest. No, not getting anything?
All I'll say is Sam Levinson is not a scab. He's not a scab. So, David Zaslav, make a deal, okay? That's what I'll say about season 3 of Euphoria. Make a deal, David. It's easy. Just come to that table. Be like, you know what? You got it, kids.
See, a good interviewing tactic is if you stay silent, you might get something. So I'm seeing how much, no, I think that's all I'm getting. Okay, but that's good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Listen, you know who you can ask about it?
Huh.
Sam is coming.
For the Idol.
On Monday.
Yes.
Ask Sam.
Have you seen it?
I have.
Oh, and? Thoughts?
It's premiering Monday at the Lumiere. See you there. What are you wearing?
I don't, you have to help me pick out my outfit.
Okay, I think I'm
Maybe
wearing.
I can borrow one of yours.
Yes, I'm
Yes.
wearing something really fun that day. Yeah.
I'm excited. I cannot wait to see it.
I will just say this. I think it's going to be like the talk of the summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's already very talked about.
It is very talked about. And never mind. I just want to say.
Yes.
Oh, God damn it.
What?
Okay, listen. I get in trouble for like defending my like one of my loudest champions. You know, you asked me earlier like why I feel the need to champion so many people. I had a lot of great people who went out of their way to like help me when they didn't need to help me, when they still didn't have their own things going on. And Sam was one of those people. He and his wife, like Ashley, like made sure that whenever I wanted to go to Sundance, when she knew I had negative $75 in my bank account, I was always there. I never felt nervous about paying for a meal because the meal was going to be paid for. And she was going to introduce me to every important person there, even though no one cared who I was and didn't know who I was. I sat with Megan Ellison because of Sam and Ashley. Like, you know, I learned from titans. And I would just say, Sam is a lot of things. The main thing he is a weirdo, and he doesn't talk to press. And I think that it opens him up for a lot of really big critique from people who like are people who would rather like engage in rumor mills than anything else. And I would just say, look up what Cheryl Roundtree was writing about before she went to the Rolling Stones, because that is the thing that most, like, the fact that we have no criticality around the people who like are doing these like really toxic stories about like these like, well, this is what's happening on this set. It's like, who is this person? Why does this feel like the National Enquirer? And it's because they basically are National Enquirer writers. And I know this because Cheryl Roundtree also wrote about Zola and said the most messed up thing about Zola that was like fully false. And then it made me look her up and I was like, oh, you're the person who writes fake stories about Meghan Markle for the Daily Mail? Got it. Anyway, that's what I have to say about The Idol.
You're like, with that tangent. And I am excited to see it and to interview the cast next week and to hear from them what they have to say about it. Okay, now you spoke about some influential women in your life on the set of Euphoria, Sydney Sweeney, Zendaya. Another woman that you are friends with is Rihanna. And I know she was a big influence for Slave Play. You're like, yes, she is.
Yeah,
yes, she
she
is.
texts me. Whatever.
She texts you. What does she text you?
The other day she said, bitch, I miss you. Where you at? That's literally like verbatim the text. And I was like, I'm in New York. And then she didn't text back. So I think
she's a little busy.
She's a little busy.
Yes.
She's a mom right now.
Yes,
you know?
she is.
I love Ree. She's the best. Yeah. We ran into each other in Barbados when I was there for Christmas last year. And she met my entire family. My mom freaked out.
Incredible, I'm sure. What have you learned from her?
I mean, I've learned how to make sure you always smell good.
Okay.
That's what I learned from Rihanna. Make sure you always smell good. Today I am laxing on that because I didn't do my like something I learned from her, layer your scents. Layer scent. It's a key tactic. TikTok is teaching a lot of people how to do it now. Rihanna's always layered her scents. That's why she smells like bubble gum in the sea. And so you're like, how does someone smell like both those things at the same time?
Right.
Layer your scents.
Okay, good to know.
That's the number one thing I've learned from her. I've also just learned that like nothing in life, no project in life is too important. No one else's deadline is too important. Is more important than like the deadline you set for yourself, right? Which is to like make something beautiful, fun, that gives you joy, right? And I think, speaking of the writer's strike, me and my fiance, saved up our ducats and invested in an apartment together, right before the writer's strike. And I had a deadline for a very big movie that I was supposed to have written this movie a year and a half ago. Luckily, my producer is here. He is a kind man. He only works with weirdo tours. And so he was like, I don't care if it takes you 4 years. It's fine. but please get it in before the writer's strike if you want money. And I was working really hard to get it in before the writer's strike. And then I got COVID. And I could have stayed up, like, fought past my sickness to get 20 pages done so I could send a first draft I didn't really like into the studio so I could get this paycheck that would like sustain me for the next 6 months. Or I could sleep and not feel like crap.
Yeah.
So I slept. Then we closed in our apartment and I realized I have no money. But it was fine, and I feel like Rihanna would also say that's fine because you know what, like I didn't want people to read it when it didn't look good.
Right.
I wanted people to read it after it felt right, after it felt like something I was proud of. And I think that a lot of women, a lot of people of color are, especially once they have this thing called heat around them, are told to just torpedo on and like live on other people's schedules. And Rihanna's like, no. And this thing, I just did this, speaking of philanthropy, I did this thing that I was very, very excited by recently, thanks to Gucci. I see one of my Gucci boys here too, wherein they invested deeply in me as an ambassador and me as someone who believes in other artists and gave me the funds to bring 5 young writers. I'm going to name all of them right now. Rihanna Simmons, DJ Hills, Chloe Meyerson, Rafi Donatich. I'm missing someone. Hold on, let me think about you. And Asa Hines. There we go. Asa, I'm so sorry. They gave me the power to bring all 5 of these writers with me to Italy for a month to sit with me and have dinner every night and to like to write work based on, like, they'd all written plays for the Francine Horn Yale Drama Series Prize, which I'm the president of. And Francine, I'm coming to visit you this week. But I was the president. I got to pick a play. The play I picked was by Jesus Valles, who wrote a play called Bathhouse.pptx. And Jesus, they're in grad school right now, so they couldn't come. So it opened me up to bring like a fifth writer with me. And they sat with me every night with my friends. I had Rebecca Hall come in. I had Janixa Bravo, Lena Dunham, Jim Wilson, who's here with Zone of Interest. They all sat with these people and they talked to them. And the main fear all these kids had was that like they were like, oh, an agent just called me because I'm in the newspaper with my name next to yours, and it says Gucci and Jeremy O'Harris, and now I feel like if I don't use this heat now, then what am I going to do? So should I sell this script or should I do? And I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like, work on your writing. Take your time. Be really happy about something, because I was like, heat is something that does not disappear. Like, energy cannot be destroyed, right? Like, it is innate, and you have an energy. That's why you're here. That's why you're sitting at this table. So relax, eat, and like, do not feel pressured because you are primarily people of color, because you're primarily femme, that like, that you being here has a timeline. There's a timeline on the success that's possible in your career.
Yes. Well, that is great advice from Rihanna to you that you're passing on to others. And I mean, she recently proved this pretty well. She did her thing. She lived her life. She came out to the Super Bowl. Everyone was there. And you know what? We're all waiting for that album. And whenever it comes, we'll be ready. Okay, so we're getting to be out of time, but there's some social media questions that were sent in. So, first one, someone that you've mentioned. What was it like working with Janixa Bravo on Zola?
Janixa Bravo is my big sister. She's the love of my life. You know that Gail, that Oprah Gail thing?
Yes.
Just quote that as my quote, because that's how I feel about Janixa. She's right now in Manchester. She was going to try to come in today, but she's filming a new TV show with our friend in Manchester, and yeah, I love her. I love her very deeply.
All right, our next question is, this is a great question. I'm going to read it, but I feel like we've answered it, so I think we should get to the audience. But thank you to whoever sent this in. How are you ensuring equitable representation and opportunities for playwrights? Is there anything you wanted to add beyond our conversation?
I think the only thing is, I think if anyone is looking for how to be equitable to people, it's, I got, when the New York Times wrote the story about my residency, one of the comments said, they're like, so obviously there's a obviously there's a criteria to be in here, and it's obviously that you're not white or male. Like, all of these titles look like agitprop, because one of the plays is called, like, you know, Racism, an essay. Another one's called White Girls Game. One is called Class, which I'm like, I guess that's agitprop, but whatever. But I was like, you know, I didn't know who wrote these plays. These were all blind submissions. These were all literal. I was like, and I followed my gut on the things that excited me. I was like, so if you want to start, like, imagining differently, I think literally take 20 scripts, like, get your assistant to take the names off of them and just read them. And I promise you, in this moment right now, the stories that will excite you the most will most likely be written by a complex array of voices.
Yes.
Because it was undeniable. When I went through the list of all the plays that my readers had read, every single person had the kind of list of a season that I would want every theater to have. There's like one brown person, one Asian person listening, one black person, one queer person, and I'm like, well, you did it. You did it. And you know what? That happens when you just take people's names off of things, where you don't need to see a face. So that's how I'd say you make it a more equitable theater. Start like living inside of the work, and the work that's about the world around us is the loudest of that work is going to be from the people who are generally oppressed, I think.
Right. All right, I think we have time for a few audience questions. There's a mic going around. If anyone has a question?
It's fine if you don't.
She asked everything.
I've had you in this room, so like, oh, there we go. There's someone right over there. As the microphone goes over there, I just want everyone to know, I know my voice makes it seem like I was up late last night because I was partying. That is not why I was late here. My hairstylist dropped out at like 1 a.m. last night. And I was freaking out because I'm a black man and I love my hair, and my mom's a hairstylist, and when my mom sees pictures of me and my hair's not right, she's like, who the hell did your hair? Why isn't it right? So I was like up until 5:30 this morning being like, what's happening with my hair? And my very sweet new assistant came to the house and saw I was still asleep, and she was just like, I don't need to wake him up, I'll let him sleep, because she was so kind, but she should have woken me up. I'm sorry I'm late.
Thank you very much for a wonderful conversation. My name is Anna Gav. I'm from Finland.
Oh, I love Finland.
Thank you.
You also have the coolest prime minister.
Yes, party time.
Yes, I'm literally obsessed.
We should invite her next time.
Please, oh my God.
Absolutely. But actually, I work all my life in fashion and art, and I would love to ask your position about the fashion and gender and this bridge between these two topics. Can you a little bit explain more?
I mean, I think fashion and gender, like, you know, fashion has no gender, and that's what I love about fashion. You know what I mean? I think that, like, having a women's week and a men's week is so dated, and I'm so excited for that to, like, sort of fall away. Because, like, oftentimes, you know, I called, Daniel Roseberry is one of my very good friends, and I called him up and I was like, hey, I'm getting 21 looks for Cannes. I want these 3 looks. And he was like, Jeremy, these are women's couture looks. Like, they won't fit you. I was like, get more men in the women's couture. I make something from my waist size, please. And he was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So he's, like, found some things for me. But it's, like, I think that there should be, because, again, I think also, like, once we start erasing, like, what a woman's shape is, what a woman's size is, like, as, like, this sort of, we will also be more inclusive around bodies, right? Because, as we know, not every woman's size is represented by Women's Week, right? And a lot of women I know feel more represented during Men's Week, which is why Bodhi, one of my very good friends, has gotten so popular, right? Because a lot of women were just, like, buying Bodhi because it was shaped in a comfortable way for, like, a contemporary woman, right? But it was only being shown at Men's Week.
Right. I mean, I would wear this in a heartbeat.
Oh,
so
thank you.
There you go.
Yeah. See, well, Gucci's always known. Gucci knows you flip and switch and shape and share and
Yes.
And can I ask one more question, if it's okay?
Yes, I believe you can.
What is your favorite color?
My favorite color? Ooh, all of them. No, I think on me it's like a blue. I like blue on me.
Like navy blue?
Yeah, I think I'm wearing navy blue after this, and then I think that otherwise I really like seeing the color red. I'm looking at this purse right here, and I'm like, that's a great red.
It's perfect, probably color match to Cannes, because the blue we see the Mediterranean, the Ferraris.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I believe we have one question over here.
Hey. Yes. Jeremy, I'm with the Golden Globe Awards.
The what?
The Golden Globe Awards.
Great.
Yes. And I have to congratulate you. You are a revelation. You are amazing. What fascinates me is the 27 outfits that you brought. How many Sorry for the flimsy question. How many suitcases did you need? And what's going to be the order that you're going to be wearing them? And what is your most favorite one?
Okay, so that's a very good question because it also reveals something else that's going on with me right now, why I'm really upset, why I'm not layering my scents. Didn't want to reveal this, but British Airways, I'm really mad at you. I brought 5 suitcases. 4 are quite large, like trunks basically, that had all of the clothes in it. Then I had a 5th one, a very small one, that just had all of my toiletries in it. Somehow, all 4 of the largest suitcases I've ever seen made it here. So I have all my clothes here. My smallest suitcase with my toiletries is gone. It's just lost. So so it's 4 suitcases. My favorite outfit, they're all my favorites. It's like outfits are like children. You don't have a favorite. But the one I'm excited for the world to meet is most likely this one by a young designer who I'm also friends with named Luar. I have a very good Luar outfit that I'm wearing to the Zone of Interest. And it's gonna gag the girls. But also I have a really good Gucci outfit that I might be wearing to my premiere tonight.
Oh, great.
So.
By the way, I have to say, the little birdie who told me about the 21 outfits, which I'm sorry that I've now put you on blast with that, is our editor-in-chief, Ramin Satoude, who I know is one of your friends, and he tipped me off on that.
Oh,
but
amazing.
I am going to be watching now to see all the outfits. I believe we're out of time.
Oh my God, this lovely person has a mic, so I just want to do it.
Is that okay? Okay, yes.
Yes, Jeremy, I am Italian. And I direct a festival in Italy, Filming Italy Sardinia, because you speak about Italy before.
I love Italy.
And I try to support women empowerment in the movie industry. And I would love to ask you why you think now in 2023 still the woman to have a high position or to become more screenwriter, more director, more female producer, why it's so difficult to join the high position in the industry of cinema? Because that I am one of the very rare female directors. We are only 2 in Italy.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for us to have the position, and I would love to ask your opinion because you support a lot women position in many ways, and in theater and many of the things you do. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I've been very blessed that I have worked with some of the most powerful, most phenomenal women in this industry across the board as executives, like Franny, who's coming, Franny from HBO is coming with The Idol this week. She's a force, Francesca Orsi. Love her so deeply. Janixa Bravo, obviously, I literally learned how to make a movie from her. Like, she is my Pedro Almodovar, like, she taught me everything. But I think the same reasons that, there are not as many people of color in power as there should be, it's the same reason there aren't women. We live in a patriarchy, and we live in a white supremacist, culture, right? And so much of that patriarchal mindset is set in across the board. Like, the fact that multiple times me and Janixa would, be having notes calls, she'd say something, and they'd be like, right, anyway, and they keep going, and I'd be like, well, no, I think Janixa had a great idea. I really think this is the thing. I'm the writer, by the way. She is the director. And they'd be like, wait, Jeremy, that's such a great point. Never heard that before. And we were like, what? She just said it. And it was a really interesting thing to notice that the best thing I could do is as an ally amplify those voices, and I think more men need to actively amplify voices and not run away from that amplification. Love Thierry, he's had programmed a great thing, but I do think it's weird that he keeps articulating that it was an accident that there's gender parity this season. He keeps being well, we didn't try to do that. We're not some woke festival. And I'm like, yes, you are. You did actively try, because that's the only reason why for the first time ever there are 7 women in competition. Don't act like it wasn't a concerted effort by a lot of women in France to make this happen. And I think it needs to be fewer women making these things happen, fewer people of color making these happen, and more allies, more men saying let me put women at the top. Let me bring more people of color into this space. Because if we don't have allies doing that, then our voices are going to go hoarse, and we're not going to do our own work. You can't work if you're also advocating, right? Which is very difficult.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you. Also, who made this?
Well, Jeremy asked who made this, and since you shouted out your grandma a ton, this is my grandma's. It's real vintage. She's 97 years old.
Oh my God.
So she'll be happy to be watching from LA.
Tell your
to
grandmother
see
she
this.
slayed. This is amazing.
Oh, I will. I
Yeah.
will. She's probably not watching now because it's 9 hours ahead, but she will be watching and she'll hear it and she'll be so excited.
One of the things I used to tell Alessandro all the time at Gucci was that the thing I loved the most about like his time at Gucci is that it made Gucci feel like you were wandering through your grandma's attic.
I love that.
And
yes.
that like drew me to it because like all of my favorite pieces I got from my grandma and grandpa's attic. Yeah.
But thank you so much,
Thank you,
Jeremy.
guys.
Thank you for being an ally. Thank all of you.
Thank you guys. Oh my God, it's so hot.
It's hot. It's hot. It's hot. It's hot.